the 401st time, I get to say welcome to Friends Talking Nerdy. This is Tim the Nerd, and seated next to me, we have a very exhausted but very happy Professor Aubrey. How you doing today?
I am doing so good. Happy 401st.
It is insane that we have reached this point.
Yeah.
I mean, but that is the beauty of podcasting. Podcasting is an art form in a lot of ways because each episode is an evolution, is a learning process to make the next one better.
That's right. That's right. You know, the show has changed a lot over the years, for sure.
And it has to. I mean, there's a reason TV shows, for instance, unless you're like Saturday Night Live or The Simpsons, don't necessarily go on for years and years and years. It's because they can't necessarily, because like take Happy Days, for instance. Like Happy Days spoke quite well to the people in the late 70s and early 80s, and that's great. But for people in 2025, and I'm talking like young people, for instance, like our age, we can watch it with nostalgia and everything, but like a 24-year-old putting on Happy Days on the Happy Days channel on Pluto TV and watching an episode, I could see them easily getting bored because it's not made for them.
Right. It was made at a time when no one could predict, and no one did predict what the world would be like 75 years later.
I don't think it's been, well...
I was thinking since the 50s.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't filmed in the 50s, of course, blah, blah, you know.
Right. But it was nostalgic of that time.
Yeah. And now, in theory, could it have potentially been possible for them to continue the story on and expand the characters?
Well, they did have spin-offs.
They did, but you remember the spin-offs are like Laverne and Shirley, Joni Loves Chachi, and Mork and Mindy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Mork and Mindy, if you don't know, young people out there, our friends in the audience, Mork and Mindy is a direct spin-off of Happy Days.
Explain it to me.
Yeah, there was one episode, and the episode in question that was filmed was essentially a backdoor pilot, to where they have Mork from Mork arrive in Milwaukee in the 1950s and cause havoc as only Robin Williams as Mork from Mork could do. It was later described as a dream sequence, but they used that as again, a backdoor pilot to get interest in creating Mork and Mindy. A backdoor pilot, what that is, because I know you're going to ask, you always ask those tough questions when I'm not 100% prepared to answer them. But a backdoor pilot is... it's an episode of an already established TV show that is meant to garner interest in potentially spinning off a particular character into another show. Like we've already talked about Good Times. The character Florida Evans was originally in the Maude TV show. So even though she was there during multiple episodes, you could call that kind of a backdoor pilot in a lot of ways because it's a character already established in show A. And if it has enough interest, show B is created. Mm-hmm. But for podcasting though, it has to be. I think comic books is probably more of an apt analogy because Spider-Man when it first came out in the 1960s is much different than how Spider-Man is presented today.
Right.
But it's still the same story.
Yeah, and you could say all sitcoms are all the same story.
Well, no, I'm talking for comic books. For the Spider-Man example, it is the same story because, essentially it is already in the Guinness Book of World Records as one of it broke the world's record for being the longest continuing story over time, period. Mm. And I mean, that's what I mean by that. Whereas sitcoms, like, even though Happy Days lasted, I believe, about a decade, the Fonz never evolved as a character. Mm-hmm. When Richie Cunningham was on the show, he never evolved as a character. And that is a drawback of sitcoms, because people do change, people do evolve. They become better people or worse people, Yeah,
I mean, I think you see that in some other long-running shows like The Office. Like those there was a lot of emotional changes going on with all of those people all the time, which is what made it a good show.
And that definitely showed the evolution of the art form of the sitcom. And while The Office in some ways has worked, in some ways has not so much worked for me. I mean, that's at the end of the day, personal preference. I definitely agree with you in the fact that, the sitcoms, especially that one in particular, did do a lot better in terms of changing the characters over time and not having them be stock characters. Like if you watch Friends, for instance, did those characters ever really change? Nah.
No.
They did. They just didn't. But that is the beauty of what we do, tying us all back in to the podcast art form, because you do have to change. Like if I kept on presenting the show as we did when we first started here, like it would have died a long time ago. I mean, it's not like we have it's not like we have a huge audience to begin with, but if I kept running the show like I ran it in 2017 when I first started this whole shindig, why would people want to listen? Because podcasting, I think, is part evolutionary. It has to be. You have to change with your audience because, I think what we do well is speak to people in our age group. And I mean, that is our audience right now. And that has to change over time because what spoke to my age group in 2017 is different than now.
Yeah.
It is. But one thing we've always done on this show is bitched about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
That's right.
Look at that.
We get to do that every year.
I'm like Buck Owens lassoing that shit in. I did it, folks. I tied it all up. Every year, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame announces their nominations for that particular year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They've done it again this year. As I always say, there is a lot to critique about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There just is. Having said that, I think the importance of talking about it is the fact that it gives us a chance here with the very small platform that we have to talk about some artists from the past that maybe for the younger folks out there, they don't necessarily know of. I think it is important to spread the word about past artists, even if they don't get inducted or whatever. This is what the beauty of what the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has done. Again, there's a lot to critique about it, but the fact that each year it causes debate is a very good thing because that debate leads people to either going to the record store of their choice or going to the streaming service of their choice and checking out these artists.
Yes, absolutely. And some of them it's good they're doing that, and others of them I'm confused.
Yes, and we will get to that shortly, but what we wanted to do is go through the list of artists that have been nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2025. The notes I've gathered here all come from an article from NPR, and the article itself was quite precise and quite, short in terms of their description, so I have no problem reading it here, and I will also make sure that the link in question is in the show description so you can read it for yourself. But what I thought would be fun would be to list off the bands in question, read the short little blurb from that article, and then talk about them.
So we're going to talk about each of them?
Each of the 2025 nominees for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, not the people that are already in there.
Right, but I thought we were doing our 5.
That will be after.
Oh, okay.
What we will do after we go through this list here is, like we did last year, give you our choice of the 5 musical artists that we would vote for if we were giving voting rights into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We will end with that.
Okay, great. As long as I get to state my opinion about this.
Yes, because it wouldn't be an episode of Friends Talking Nerdy without it.
No, it wouldn't.
Damn right. All right, shall I go to the first choice?
Yes.
All right, the first choice, we can thank Led Zeppelin for them. Bad Company.
Mm.
Bad Company, the English rock band that released its self-titled debut in 1974 on Led Zeppelin's Swan Song Records, appears on the shortlist for the first time ever. The supergroup's original lineup featured vocalist Paul Rodgers and drummer Simon Kirke, who'd both been in the band Free, as well as former Mott the Hoople guitarist Mick Ralphs and former King Crimson bassist Boz Burrell. I'm not going to proclaim to be a big fan of Bad Company. I'm familiar. We're Bad Company.
Till the day I die.
Like, yeah. Like,
I don't know what other song they have produced.
Because of my disinterest in them, thanks to that Bad Company self-titled song, like I've not dived deep into their catalog. So,
No.
it's like they may have a great catalog that maybe I would rock out to, but Sewer Rat may taste like pumpkin pie. To use that old analogy. To be fair, though, Freddie Mercury was apparently a big fan of Paul Rodgers as a singer, and in the 2010s, when Brian May and Roger Deacon, the guitarist and drummer for Queen, wanted to start touring again, the first person they contacted was Paul Rodgers.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they went on tour. It was a greatest hits tour, and I believe they did play some songs from Paul Rodgers' work, not only with Free, but with Bad Company as well. But, Freddie Mercury was a fan, and, he had some good ideas when it came to music, so you have to take that into consideration. And also, I think it is very important here to express the fact that you and I both understand that even though we may not particularly care for a particular artist ourselves, it is possible to not like an artist but still respect them and still understand that they deserve their flowers when the time is right.
But then how does one judge?
It's about being honest, being critical. Like I brought up the Beyonce example before. Like, am I a huge fan of her work? Not at all. I mean, I did dig the Cowboy Carter album.
Okay.
But the rest of the stuff, not so much.
Seriously? Single ladies?
No. Yeah, because again, I worked in a record store when Say My Name from Destiny's Child came out, and that was just on loop. Say my name, say my name. It's like, shut up, shut up. And there was a point where I would say, Beyonce sucks, she's not good. And it's just, and it took me time to think critically about that. It's like, do I like her? No. And that's okay. But how can I say she sucks when she's selling all these albums and inspiring all these people, right?
Right. Because she does not suck.
Yeah, she does not. It is, again...
But then you look at Bad Company, and they suck.
But you think they suck.
Right.
But
nobody thinks Beyonce sucks. It's just like nobody thinks Dolly Parton sucks. And nobody thinks Snoop Dogg sucks. Like, there are certain people who have the status of being able to do no wrong, entertainment-wise.
But you were also talking about people that have found ways to speak to multiple generations of audiences out there. And as, the older you get, the more clear it becomes the fact that there are artists, whether it be writers, actors, musicians, movie makers, whatever, that can make great art for a particular point in time, but that art is not necessarily accepted well in later years. Think of Revenge of the Nerds. Think of Police Academy. Popular movies in the 80s, but people watch them now and like, what the hell was wrong with people in the 80s?
Yeah. I mean, it's some serious badness. And when I look back at things just from like the aughts, pretty bad.
Yeah. But, I guess at the end of the day, I do my best to try to have as critical a hat as I can. Again, it is okay to accept the fact that you don't like an artist, but it is also important to do your best to be honest about the impact this person has. And and I don't think record sales are the only criteria that should be looked at here, similar to like box office receipts. Otherwise, the Transformers movies would be considered the greatest movies ever made. And they're just not. There are the things that do come into account, but take the Transformers things. Like even today, I don't think people. I mean, people enjoyed them. Obviously, they wouldn't have made as much money as they did, but could people that saw that movie 5 years ago really sit back and talk about how beautiful that movie was, the experience, the stories, the subtext, and all that stuff? No, it was just like I had fun.
Yeah,
and that's great. But that doesn't mean you're going to be long lasting, in my opinion, like Bad Company. But it's also possible that maybe there are people out there that are really inspired by Bad Company, right?
yes.
Yeah, like, do I agree with them? No. Do you agree with them? No.
Yeah.
But you have to accept that fact.
No, it's true. There are lots of things that are hard to accept, that people are really different from you.
Yeah.
And this is a very minor one.
Yeah. Compared to Who's in the White House. But shall I go on to the next choice?
Yes, please.
All right. This one is one that's going to make us feel old here. The Black Crowes.
Da-na-na-na-na,
Yeah, the Black Crowes, led by Georgia-born brothers Chris and Rich Robinson, are also first-timers on the list of nominees. The blues revival band behind hits like She Talks to Angels and Hard to Handle has undergone decades of breakups, changing lineups, and reunions. Last year, the brothers returned to their southern rock roots on their first new album in over a decade, Happiness Bastards. I've talked about them recently. I've talked about them because of the song Hard to Handle, and it kind of pisses me off that the NPR, of all places, was quite dismissive of this. When Hard to Handle was released, there was zero mention of the fact that Otis Redding wrote and recorded that song first in the 60s. Zero.
Yeah, zero.
Now, having said that, you may have a Black Crowes fan like, well, his name is listed as a songwriter on the album. You don't see that on MTV. I'm sorry. All you saw was the name of the band, the name of the song, the name of the album it came from, and then the record company. It shows. It's a great example, I guess, of just how much black music has been silenced over time. Why not?
Stolen.
Yeah, like, why didn't we hear interviews with the people from this band like, hey, this is a great Otis Redding song. We wanted to cover it. We wanted to, make
Listen to this. Listen to the original.
if by creating the cover, you get more people listening to the original, like Beyonce did with Cowboy Carter. Like, that is a beautiful thing. Like the Beatles did with Motown.
Yeah.
Like the Rolling Stones did with like Muddy Waters and other blues artists. That is being a true student of music. Like the Black Crowes, not so much. Now, having said that, like I've not done a deep dive here. I've not done research to specifically go through the years to find out whether these guys in the band came out and said this song is from Otis Redding. All I can look back on at the end of the day is my remembering of them being popular during the MTV era and how they were presented on the radio. And again, no word about Otis Redding at all.
Yeah, and so I think that should disqualify them from this list. So let's just throw them out.
Yeah, fuck them. All right, shall I go on to the next one?
Yes.
Oh, you're going to love this. Mariah Carey. Mariah Carey, one of the most enduring pop stars to get her start in the 1990s, appears on the Hall of Fame shortlist for the second consecutive year. The unofficial Queen of Christmas, whose vocal range spans 5 octaves, still rules the Billboard charts every holiday season. She falls, for me, into that category that Transformers the movie falls into. Just because a lot of people buy it. Like, if she were to pass away, and I'm not looking for her to pass away anytime soon, I hope she lives well into her. I hope she's 105 when she passes away. But the day after she does pass away, people are not going to think of her music like people thought of, like, John Lennon, like people think of Tina Turner, like people would think of Diana Ross, on the day she passes away.
Elton John.
Like, She is the Applebee's of pop music. She's the 90s Whitney Houston minus the crack habit. Again, we both grew up in the era of MTV to where her music was heavily pushed.
Definitely. She was
So,
very, mainstream. She was the mainstream female artist of that time,
yeah.
singing that kind of music.
Now, again, it is very much possible that, I'm speaking from a place of a person who just is not a fan of her music, and that is okay in and of itself. So if there are people out there that have been inspired by her music, great, thumbs up. But, like, it's always just been so unoriginal.
Mm-hmm.
It's
I just hate the sound of it. It's like nails on a chalkboard for me.
yeah.
Like I can't.
Yeah, a group of animals being like electrocuted would make that noise.
Right.
Yeah, and we should not support that.
No.
All right. So speaking of that, how about we go on to the next choice since we both love Mariah Carey?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Chubby Checker.
Hey.
Chubby Checker, who danced his way to the top of the Billboard's Hot 100 with his 1960 cover of The Twist, is shortlisted for the first time. In 2001, Checker took out a full-page ad in Billboard magazine arguing that he is one of rock and roll's most underappreciated figures.
Mm-hmm.
His songs are garbage. But I think he was, in a lot of ways, a gateway for people into rock and roll in the early 60s. He just was. Because, that was at the time to where, like, 45s, singles, were a lot more popular than they were in our era, for instance.
Mm-hmm. And radio was huge.
And so you would have people that would be interested in, Chubby Checker, but maybe they also saw Chubby Checker on American Bandstand, which he was on many times. And they also saw that the Supremes were on American Bandstand, too. And so grab that album. I think, if anything, you got to think of Chubby Checker as kind of like a gateway artist. I don't appreciate his music at all, but I do think he did in a lot of ways help inspire very young people to try other forms of music as well and to become interested in rock music.
I think as a dancer, he did the same thing. He introduced white audiences to black dancing.
The Twist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't the first.
Well, yeah.
He wasn't the best, but for that generation, maybe not the generation, but for that, like, year or two that he was really popular.
I mean, it's also funny, too, how, like, even in the 80s, like, he did a cover of The Twist with the Fat Boys.
Mm.
Like, that's 20 years of milking one song,
Mm-hmm.
In the 80s. And of course, up to today. Like I said, I would not be offended if he got in because, again, I do think he was a gateway in terms of enticing people to try out rock music and try different things, and I think that is something to consider when you are, if you were a voter for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Do I like his music? Hell no. It's an awful earworm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fuck you.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Shall I go on to the next one here?
Yes, please do.
All right. This next one is Mr. Joe Cocker. Joe Cocker, the late English musician who became a star in the U.S. with his raspy rendition of With a Little Help from My Friends at Woodstock in 1969, is a first-time nominee. With 40 albums under his belt, Cocker told NPR that his hit love song, You Are So Beautiful, was amongst his favorites. It is a crime that it took him this long to get a nomination. I think he's one of those voices that just epitomizes rock music. I do think, I will admit, to coming up from being introduced to his music thanks to the Wonder Years. I'm not going to lie.
Okay.
But, he has had quite the impact. Think of John Belushi. John Belushi had a great Joe Cocker impression.
Mm-hmm.
Before Saturday Night Live, National Lampoon had a Broadway show called National Lampoon's Lemmings, which was a goof on Woodstock.
Ah.
And John Belushi helped perfect his Joe Cocker impersonation during that, and of course brought it to Saturday Night Live and did a duet with Joe Cocker.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because Joe Cocker, his singing style, if you saw him live, was quite unique because it did look like he was having a seizure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I remember watching the Woodstock movie. That's how I was introduced to Joe Cocker. Other than hearing it on the radio, like, "You Are So Beautiful to Me," like, who didn't hear that song nearly every day on the radio back in the 80s?
Yeah, and what was that song that he did? Didn't he do one for Dirty Dancing? Up Where We Belong.
Oh, yeah.
Love lift us up where, like, yeah, I mean, especially with his voice and his appearance, I don't say that as a knock, but I say that as how great it was that he was able to become a big hit in the 80s because of music videos. The music industry was kind of veering more towards their artist being more visually appealing to the masses, whether it was right or not, and like he was just a balding guy in his 40s with a little bit of a gut that was still able to make great videos and great songs that spoke to people.
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to say he's my absolute favorite artist in the world? Of course not. But, with a little help from my friends, feeling all right, damn good songs.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. All right. Shall I go on to the next choice?
Yes, please.
All right.
And what's funny is that every time you talk about them, you convince me of your position. So it's going to be interesting when we talk about our 5 favorites to deal with these kinds of cognitive dissonances.
Yeah. All right. How about the next one here? Mr. Billy Idol.
Yeah, what is that about?
Billy Idol, the bleach, blonde bad boy behind rock hits filled with punk attitude like Rebel Yell, White Wedding, and Dancing with Myself, appears on the list for the first time. Idol was a key figure in the second British invasion, fueled by the rise of MTV in the 80s. I mean, I think of that whole Beavis and Butthead goofing on Dancing with Myself, playing with myself, playing.
Sure.
Like, if Billy Idol came to town, I would jump at a chance to see him perform.
Really?
He's a great artist, but I think, do we really talk about more of his music past his first album? We really don't. That does not mean he's a bad musician. But, like Chubby Checker, I think he is a person that has found a way to continue to milk the success of that first album. I mean, are people really talking about his Christmas album, for instance?
No.
And that's kind of hyperbolic, I guess. But it still, though, like, I am not objecting to him potentially getting in, but I think it is important to be critical of where he really truly stands in rock and roll history. And great first album. What else after that?
Mm-hmm. Leather.
Wearing leather, maybe, but I don't know about an album called Leather.
No, I meant just wearing leather.
Yeah.
That was like his next move.
Well, he always did that. I mean, he did have a great single for the soundtrack to The Adventures of Fort Fairlane, Cradle of Love.
Yeah, Cradle of Love.
Rock the Cradle of Love, when they did the video.
He just is like a caricature of himself.
He is.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
It's the corporate version of punk, too, because, like, Billy Idol was in a punk band in the 70s, and in fact, when the Sex Pistols did an infamous talk show appearance in England in the late 70s, he was actually on stage with them while it was filmed. But, yeah, like... Rebel Yell, White Wedding were songs that he had with his punk band, but, going the corporate route ended up making a lot of money by making them more palatable by making them more popular. Now, just to be fair for music I like, Judas Priest did the same thing with "You Got Another Thing Coming" and "Breaking the Law."
Mm-hmm.
They took metal.
Breaking the law.
But with the Breaking the Law, they made it into a pop hit. It wasn't just straight up guitars, and screaming and all that. I mean, there was screaming, there was guitars, but it was done in a poppy way to where people could, snap their fingers and dance to it.
Uh-huh.
They made money. Great. I would make money in this podcast if I could. I'm not against making money, but you do have to recognize what happened here.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on Billy Idol?
No, I mean, I think you're hitting the high points of all of these folks.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, let's speak of two bands in one.
Oh yeah. Now you're talking.
Yeah. Joy Division / New Order.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, why they're listing these two as one. The lead singer of Joy Division had a lot of mental health issues and ultimately passed away way too early. But the remaining members of the band ended up creating the band New Order.
Right, and they had made an agreement that they wouldn't use the name Joy Division if any of them were not in the band.
Now, when it comes to Joy Division, New Order, I have not heard much Joy Division at all. I did have a friend back in the day who was really into them, and, that's the reason why they were a friend back in the day, among other things. New Order, not a big fan as well, but their big hit, How Does It Feel? I mean, that dance hit, like, that's catchy. That's catchy. I like that one.
Yeah, you like that song that you just tried to sing?
Yes.
How does it feel?
Yeah. To treat me like you do.
So
Blue Monday.
Blue Monday, yes. That was their most popular single for sure.
Put my feet to the coals.
Yeah, I mean, these guys, they were from Manchester, around Manchester, Salford. The same place that Morrissey is from. The exact same small town near Manchester.
That explains Joy Division.
And they were really influential, really. They influenced the formation of post-punk electronica music. Like, they took a bunch of genres of music and mashed them together and came out with that 80s new wave.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, to be clear, for me, when it comes to these two bands, I really don't honestly know much about them, so I can't really speak much more than that. The Blue Monday song, pretty good. I mean, that is playlist worthy, if there ever is one, because it is catchy. But, anything else about Joy Division and New Order from you?
Well, I think the only other thing that I'll say is that they did the soundtrack for Pretty in Pink, which is one of my favorite movies. If you haven't seen it, it's one of the 80s Molly Ringwald movies.
From John Hughes, yeah.
From John Hughes, that also included John Cryer. And the best music, man. And that's how I just really got into that new wave kind of music, was through the Pretty in Pink soundtrack.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of new wave-ish, how about I go on to the next one?
Yeah.
All right. The next one, Cyndi Lauper.
Hey.
Yes. Cyndi Lauper, another staple of 80s dance floors, is nominated for the second time. The flamboyant pop star behind off-kilter girl power anthems like Girls Just Want to Have Fun has dabbled in a number of genres over her career, including blues and country. I think we all know where I stand. I think we all know where you stand. She deserved it the first time she was nominated. She deserves it now.
Absolutely, she deserves it.
And like I said, too, I mean, because we've talked about this before, especially during our talk about Madonna. While Cyndi is in the pop category, I think it's her music, at the beginning at least, because, as the article pointed out, she did dabble in a lot of stuff. Her first album, She's So Unusual, was kind of like poppy new wave.
Mm-hmm.
In the vein of like a Blondie or a Talking Heads, but more of a pop, appealing to a younger, poppier audience.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Adolescent girls, just like me.
Yes, or to her credit, she tried to reach out to guys like me, and it worked.
Well, it's true.
Through her work in professional wrestling and all that stuff. So,
Hmm.
oh man, I teared up so much when she talked about Roddy Piper and all that at the concert. It was great and everything. But again, we've talked about Cyndi Lauper enough. I don't think we need to elaborate any further. Like, and even though we've talked about 5 votes at the end, I think more than likely, I don't know your list, but more than likely, we probably have really 4 other choices that we're going to be talking about apart from Cyndi Lauper.
Yeah, I'd say she made both of our lists.
Yeah. How about I go into the next one here?
Yeah.
All right, the next one nominated for this year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is a Mexican band called Mania. I'm assuming it is pronounced Mania. It's Mana, but the last A has that little umlaut thing over the top, and I believe in Spanish, that when you see that, it's you're doing more of a nya type of sound or something like that. So again, I am not in any way, shape, or form an expert on the Spanish language, but I believe it is pronounced that. But feel free to correct me out there, friends at home.
Yeah. Let us know if
Yeah.
he said it correctly or not.
All right, Manya, the Mexican band behind rock and Espanol hits like Hoy Mi Amor, Calvado en un bar, and Mariposa Triconera
Mariposa is a butterfly.
Are shortlisted for the first time. If inducted, the band would become the first artist to make exclusively Spanish language music to be inducted in the Rock Hall. I have listened to a couple of their tracks thanks to their nomination this year, which is the beauty of what the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame can do. You want to check out the artist in question. It didn't enthrall me. I'm not a new fan of this band. I would not necessarily even be against them being inducted, but if you have to have a whole college course to teach you about the history of that band, because the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is primarily United States based, in terms of the music presentation, then maybe at this point in time they are not at that point, because I think it's like and again, I'm not trying to knock this band in any way, shape, or form. It's just that, to me, getting inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, even if you are, from like another country or even another genre of music, you have to be able to show how you inspired rock music in some way, shape, or form. And at this point, I don't know if they do, if they have.
Well, my take on it is that they were a groundbreaking Latino group, like all dudes, right?
Yeah, apparently they've been described as the Mexican Bon Jovi.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So they took rock and roll and they made it Mexican. And that has continued in every genre. I mean, now there's Mexican hip hop and Colombian whatever.
Yeah, and I guess to me, though, it just needs to be explained better why they deserve it, especially when so many other artists are not either nominated or inducted as of yet. That have far more groundbreaking contributions to rock history.
But what if this person is for the Spanish speaking population? What if this band is just as important as those bands to to the music they listen to?
If that is the case, I am all for being educated on that. I'm not, to be 100% clear, I am not against the idea of them being nominated. I'm not against the idea of them being inducted. It's just why.
Right, but I just explained it to you.
Yeah.
And so what's your response?
Again, I need to be told why at this point. Just because they sold a lot of records in Mexico doesn't mean they necessarily impacted rock and roll in any way. Because can you seriously say Bon Jovi really impacted rock and roll in a lot of ways? They sold a lot of records, but Transformers made $1 billion at the box office too.
You just can't stop talking about Transformers.
It's the perfect example. I mean, it's uh, selling a lot of albums does not necessarily mean you are going to be remembered for your.
I guess I'm looking at it like it's a good thing to expand the types of music that do contribute to the melting pot of what rock and roll is.
And to be 100% clear, I am not disagreeing with that in any way, shape, or form. All I'm asking for, I guess, is a little more explanation. Now, granted, I'm going from an NPR article here. NPR has a good history of being fair, of being truthful. It's just they also did. It's a one paragraph snippet here about that band.
Yeah.
And now could I have done a lot more research in terms of finding out, their history and seeing their connections? Sure, and that's on me as well. But I'm also very much open to being educated on why they are important. I'm not against them being inducted. Like I said, it's just in this particular case, it just honestly feels like they put. Like a few years back, they had the African artist Fela Kuti, I believe his name was, that they nominated, and again, it's great that they nominated because the pure act of nomination, it creates situations like what we're doing right now. We're talking about this band.
Yeah.
It's just at the end of the day, I would be very shocked if this band were inducted. Not because they're not deserving or whatever, but compared to the other names in there, the other names that you have listed on here are much more known than they are.
Yeah.
And this is something like the Fela Kuti example that, there has to be a lot more education. Now, maybe this is something to where maybe they don't get inducted their first time, second time, third, fourth, fifth time. There are people that have been nominated multiple times before they got in. So if this is something that starts the snowball rolling to where somewhere down the road they do get inducted, again, I don't have to be a fan to still, give them their flowers, right?
Sure.
So that's where I stand.
All right. Well, that's all understandable.
All right. How about I dive into the next one before, before something. All right. This whole list, a lot of it comes directly from the 90s. This is a band that is going to be reuniting this year for the first time in many years. A band with two brothers. It is Oasis. Oasis, the Brit pop group led by the famously feuding brothers Liam and Noel Gallagher, are shortlisted for the second year in a row. Last year, the Gallaghers put their beef aside and announced a 2025 tour that resulted in a Ticketmaster meltdown and subsequent government investigation.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's over.
Yeah. I remember Wonderwall. Thought it was whiny British people being whiny. I've definitely heard the stories about the brothers arguing and everything, which is quite reminiscent of another British group that started in the 60s called the Kinks. Ray Davies and Dave Davies were feuding brothers in a very popular band as well. This is, like the Black Crowes example too. I think another reason why I'm probably biased against them at this point is that you can hear their influences in their music. It's not like it's not like in Elvis, with his first big hit, It's All Right. That was a cover of a blues song, and it was a pretty faithful cover, but he also brought his own little spin to it. And it's like, I never necessarily heard that from Oasis. I never heard that really from the Black Crowes either. It was just like with the Black Crowes, they're doing Aerosmith meets Zeppelin,
Right.
And with Oasis, it was them trying to copy, they were definitely fans of the Beatles, let's put it that way. Wonderwall was the title of George Harrison's first solo album, I believe.
Oh, wow.
Because it was a movie soundtrack. His first, solo album of original music was All Things Must Pass, of course.
Great album.
Yes, but what are your thoughts on Oasis? Were you a big fan in the 90s?
No, I was not a fan at all of Oasis. I remember Wonderwall, and I hated that song. Now, looking back, they had some hits. They were probably the most well-known British band at the time that was, producing music.
And yeah, music for our era, I don't really have much more to say about them. Like, Am I going to be offended if they were to be inducted and, do the album sales, and due to the fact that they are reuniting this year, I would be shocked if they were not inducted. But yeah, spoilers here, they would not get my vote.
Yeah,
They're,
mine either.
they're just too derivative.
Yeah.
Fancy word.
Yeah.
All right. How about I go into the next one?
Yes.
All right. OutKast. OutKast, legendary rap group made up of Big Boi and Andre 3000, is nominated for the first time. The Atlians' inclusion on this year's shortlist emphasizes the Rock Hall's ongoing effort to expand its definition of rock by including country, pop, and hip hop stars. Even by that definition, though, and I will be, full disclosure up front, I know I'm familiar with a couple of OutKast songs, but I'm not ever going to proclaim to be their biggest fan. Even by that whole definition of understanding that the Rock Hall is expanding by including, hip hop artists and country artists and stuff as well, do uh, you can't tell me that there aren't deserving hip hop artists from the 70s, 80s, and 90s that deserve it before OutKast, who got their start in the 2000s.
But why is it temporal? What about it is temporal? Why should OutKast not get it when they were influential on all the hip hop that came after them? And then they were a hip hop duo, but like they had poppy songs.
Okay, and that's fine and all. And like I said, I would not be against them being inducted. It's just this kind of goes back to even with the rock choices, the amount of times that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has neglected to take an artist of rock music in the past and not even bother to either nominate them, or if they nominate them, don't let them get in. Like Joe Cocker. This is the first time he was nominated, and he got his start in the 60s. He's been qualified to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, at least since the late 80s, early 90s.
Sure.
Because the whole thing is that you were eligible to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 25 years after the release of your first album.
I see.
And again, I'm not, when it comes to OutKast, I'm not saying they aren't deserving. I just, similar to rock choices as well that we've talked about in the past, like Warren Zevon, I just think that there are other hip hop artists that deserve it first.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Mm-hmm.
Again, am I going to throw a fit if they get inducted? No. And, being that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for the past number of years has tried to include hip hop acts, and this is the only hip hop act that is being nominated this year, more than likely they're getting in.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I hope so.
Yeah, it's just older people should get the recognition first,
I just don't understand that.
Because they have, someone like a Joe Cocker, even though he's passed away, of course, his music started in the 60s and continues to resonate with people today. Whereas there are a number of artists that got their start in the 60s who may have gone, Steve Winwood. Are we talking about Steve Winwood? Steve Winwood got his start in the 60s as well and continued to make hits all the way into the 80s. But unlike Joe Cocker, went out of public consciousness. That doesn't mean he was a bad musician for any Steve Winwood fans out there. I want to make that clear, but we're talking the public consciousness here, in terms of what songs still resonate with people over time. And I think, being that they are pretty close to that 25-year mark, OutKast, I don't think we're necessarily there yet to see if, because essentially, don't they say that 20 years is essentially a generation?
Yeah.
So, 25 years, and if they were inducted relatively soon after their first album, nominated relatively soon after their first album, we're barely out of that first generation of their music. Whereas with Joe Cocker, it's been around for a few generations and has a bigger impact.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. God damn it.
Yes.
I'm passionate about it. Now, here's one that I know you're extremely passionate about in a very negative way.
Yeah.
Phish.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, Phish, the psych rock group from Vermont that rose to the top of the jam band scene in the mid 90s, is also nominated for the first time. Known for their improvisational live shows, the band continues to tour and released its 16th studio album, Evolve, last summer. I can proudly say I've never heard any of their music.
That I've never heard any of it except against my will. Except that somebody originally was like, this is the best band ever. And I was like, this is the shittiest band I've ever heard. And then, various other people have tried to get me to listen to them over the years. Terrible.
That reminds me of those that South Park episode where Eric Cartman was upset that people kept recommending Family Guy to him over and over again because, oh, it's just like your humor, man. You'll love it. It's like, I fucking hate it. Yeah, I mean, they were our generation Grateful Dead. I mean, and I am all for anybody in a creative field being able to go out and make money. So I don't have to like them to still, give them their due in terms of being able to do that and not have to do a regular 9 to 5 job.
Well, if Grateful Dead is not in there.
Grateful Dead's in there.
Okay, well, that's fine then.
Yeah. Yeah, let's just go on because obviously, like I said, I've not listened to their music at all, even though I know I would not like it. So, yeah, let's go on to the next choice here. Now, this band here, I actually have a photo, thanks to you, of me giving a high five to a statue of the late lead singer of this band, Soundgarden.
Mm-hmm.
Which I found out after the fact. The name Soundgarden is based on an actual thing called a Soundgarden that is a Seattle museum exhibit.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Anyway, Soundgarden, one of the biggest grunge bands to come.
I think I know this. When it rains, it makes music.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
All right, Soundgarden, one of the biggest grunge bands to come out of the Pacific Northwest in the 80s and 90s, appears on a short list for the third time. If you're involved with your bandmates and fellow musicians in your peer group, you can sometimes get isolated from the general historical context of how the band has evolved and become part of the broader community of music and musicians. Guitarist Kim Thayil told Billboard when the group was nominated in 2023. So I think that acknowledgement and that recognition was a reminder that, hey, the work that you did with your partners was part of a continuity and a history of music. That's kind of cool. Now, I've talked about it before. I'm not going to proclaim to be the biggest Soundgarden fan. I think they were more in the category, like they were the grunge version of like Taylor Swift for me. I liked a couple of songs, but entire albums not so much. Black Hole Sun was great. Rusty Cage was great. Johnny Cash's cover of Rusty Cage was great. I did love Chris Cornell's Bond song. He did the theme song for Casino Royale.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, called "You Know My Name." They're like Soundgarden. If you want to compare grunge bands to bands from the 60s, Soundgarden in a lot of ways is like The Who in terms of, like Nirvana was the Beatles. You can argue that probably the Smashing Pumpkins were like the Rolling Stones or something like that. And then Soundgarden would be like The Who in terms of how people would rank him. And I'm sure I'll probably piss somebody off by saying that. But with Chris Cornell's voice alone, what is not rock about his voice, right? It's unfortunate that he passed away when he did, but I think their music does resonate here. What do you think about Soundgarden?
Yeah, I think that it really does stand the test of time, and that Black Hole Sun is a really great song. That's my favorite song of theirs for sure.
Yep. Yeah, and I know you love the video. We've talked about the video before on the show.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the whole weird, bizarre face-stretching video that they did. I remember Beavis and Butthead watching that, and Beavis was like, whoa, look at their face. Yeah, definitely deserving. But how about we go to the last nominee here?
Okay.
The White Stripes.
Mm-hmm.
The White Stripes, a guitar, drums, and vocals duo who made stripped-down, blues-inspired garage rock, is nominated a second time. Jack and Meg White, who initially pretended to be siblings but in actuality were ex-spouses, were at the forefront of the garage rock revival that would rule the early 2000s. They did some great songs. Fell in Love with a Girl, nice fast-paced rock song that was actually covered by Joss Stone for her first album, The Soul Sessions.
Hmm.
She did a soul version that fell in love, and she retitled it "Fell in Love with a Boy." Really good one, of course. Seven Nation Army. Do
Yeah.
do 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 do. The one guitar solo that most anybody can play after 5 minutes of trying on a guitar, because it's really just one string. I haven't listened to too much of their music, but I have a lot of respect for Jack White. In some ways, though, I think you can make an argument for this being like trying to push forward the Velvet Underground and diminish Lou Reed's career.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously both are very much deserving, but like the White Stripes was a small chapter in Jack White's overall music career. And, I don't know if the White Stripes on their own would necessarily deserve it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think if Jack White was nominated on his own, he would be much more defensible.
Yeah. You're not a big fan, huh?
For the White Stripes? No.
They didn't work for you?
No, they did not work for me.
All right.
I was not into that kind of music when they were popular.
Yeah. You were still in your Lilith Fair age?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
No, that was way post Lilith Fair. That was more like,
Early 2000s?
early 2000s. Like,
lots of acoustic guitars a little bit.
yeah, lots of acoustic guitars. Yeah, pretty much.
Any names come to mind?
Not at the moment, no, or I would have mentioned them.
Well, I mean, you love to put me in the hot spot sometimes. Well, if you don't have anything more to say about the White Stripes, how about you tell now, like we did last year, and I hope to make this a tradition here. What we did is we chose among this list here our 5 choices as if we were voters for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ourselves. As we discussed, like we didn't have any firm rules that we sat down and wrote on paper or anything like that. But like I think the general idea that we chose was choosing the ones that we felt were the best deserving to be inducted, whether we liked them or not.
That's right.
Yeah. So how about you tell us your 5 choices?
Okay, I'm gonna.
All right.
All right. So, number 1 is New Order and Joy Division. You get 2 for 1. Number 2, surprisingly, is Chubby Checker. Mostly because, did you know that he sued a company that made an app called Chubby Checker that was about penis and size related to foot size. And so he sued them. I don't know if he won or not, but it was hilarious.
I mean, wouldn't that be the greatest commercial in the world? Hi, I'm Chubby Checker. Have you ever wondered about the size of your dick? Go to this new app.
Yeah. And did you know that he protested outside the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame back in 2002?
Yeah.
Because he didn't think that they had, he should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He himself went and protested.
Well, and as the NPR article talked about, even in 2001 took out a full-page ad in Billboard magazine.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, yeah, granted, a lot of that is like self-promotion or stuff like that. It keeps his name out there, but why wouldn't you, as an artist, if you were proud of your career, want to, keep putting your name out there?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Next choices.
Cyndi Lauper.
Mm-hmm.
OutKast. Soundgarden.
All right. Great choices. How about I go into mine?
Yeah.
All right. The number 1 here, going to be quite shocking. Cyndi Lauper.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because while like Billy Idol, some may argue that, she is more known for that first album than everything else. For me, the reason I chose her was the fact that first album inspired a vast array of people to get involved in music and the creative arts that weren't lily white guys like me.
Yeah, and her music has been covered in almost every genre of other music.
Yep, and she's worked with a lot of unique, different artists from different genres. I even forgot to mention this. You remember Pee Wee's Playhouse?
Mm-hmm.
She did the theme song.
Oh yeah.
With that high, I don't know the lyrics, but it's that high pitched like 30s flapper girl singing.
Uh-huh.
Just great there. But
Yeah.
that's why I chose her. Second one, Soundgarden. They are definitely deserving. Like, I'm not a huge fan of their entire catalog. I think they were a little too dark for my taste, compared to like a Nirvana. Nirvana made the darkness more palatable and poppy, but they're very much deserving because, if you listen to, heavy hard rock music today or metal music today, you can hear Soundgarden's influence.
Yes.
The next one here, even though I just gave a great argument as to why they should not be inducted, the White Stripes.
Yeah.
There were a number of bands like the Black Keys and whatnot that were part of that garage rock early 2000s bid, but Jack White's work still shines through today. Compared to like the Black Keys. Like the Black Keys tried to have a tour recently and they had to cancel it due to lack of ticket sales. But if Jack White goes,
I don't even know who that is.
I'm sure if I played a song or two, one of their famous songs, their famous songs have been in like commercials in the past.
Okay.
So it's something I'm sure you've probably heard, but that doesn't. Otherwise, we'd still be talking about the Lovin' Spoonful, right? I mean,
Right.
a lot of the Lovin' Spoonful stuff is in commercials now, not necessarily enjoyed for the musical quality that it is.
Correct.
All right, my number 4, Joe Cocker. He's one of those, like, he should have been in a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know he was not on your list, but he is he was.
I would have traded him for Chubby Checker after our conversations about it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, my 5th one, Chubby Checker.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like I said, I think it should not be dismissed, the notion of somebody inspiring people to take a broader look into in this case music, like the Muppet Show, for instance. What it did for comedy for young kids is introduce them to comedy and fantasy and different things to check out. And I think Chubby Checker with a twist, for as abysmal as that music is, you cannot deny the impact that it had. You just can't, and I think he should be rewarded for that.
Sure, and he really wants it.
Apparently, yeah. Well, watch him this time be like, no, fuck you. Or he'll show up and like drop his pants like, suck it.
Right, like, check my chubby.
Yeah, anyway. Any other thoughts on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
No.
Yeah, we gotta stop this. Anyway, we are at episode 401.
401.
I can't believe we've made it this far. I mean, like, most podcasts, honestly, don't make it past the first 20 episodes. I mean, that, statistically speaking, that is just a fact. If you can make it past the 20 episode mark, then at that point it's become habit,
Right, as long as you don't miss them.
Yes, I mean, consistency is definitely the key here. But like, your first episode was all the way back in episode 87.
Yeah.
When we reviewed In the Airplane Over the Stars.
Over the sea.
Over the Sea. So it shows you how much I loved and remembered that album.
That was back when we would do this thing where both of us would listen to an album and then we would go track by track through the album talking about each song.
Yeah, I mean, not a bad idea for a show, let's put it that way. But, the reason we don't do that anymore, the track-by-track discussions at the very least, is that we're also not musicians. I think, that type of discussion is best done by people that are active musicians. What I mean by active musicians is people, that are actively, no, I'm not talking like, topping the Billboard charts. It could be like a band that plays a local bar every now and then, right? But active musicians,
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why we don't do that. But that does not mean I didn't love that experience either, because it, reviewing the different albums opened me up to a lot more different music.
Do you think so?
I did, yeah.
Can you think of anything in particular that? No. Okay. That's fine. So, 401, I remember listening to when we first started talking to each other. I listened to a bunch of episodes of the show, and they were they changed so much just in those first 85 episodes or whatever, from what they started out being to what they were then, which was, had some structure to it. But I think over time, we've just added more and more structure, and that has helped the show, I think, is more enjoyable now than it was then.
Definitely agreed. I say that, and I hope people, if people that are listening to this that have been a part of the shows in the past, if they're listening to this, I hope they understand the why I say it that way. But I brought up this example before as well. Trey Parker and Matt Stone have been very open about the fact that they are not comfortable with the early seasons of South Park.
Uh-huh.
And it's not that the early seasons of South Park are bad.
No, they're awesome.
Yeah, it's just that, they have learned and evolved so much as, artists in terms of creating that show as well as all the other things that they do that it is done so much differently. Like, yeah, there was like when the biggest change that we've made recently was switching the main event from ending the show to starting the show.
Mm-hmm.
And, that I think did help in terms of structure, kind of get the ball rolling right away. It's like, yeah, hindsight being 2020, it's like we should give them the audience the main dish first. And then if they want to stick around and hear us doing what we're doing right now, that's up to them.
Sure.
And just overall too, like, yeah, like back in the day when I recorded, it's like we didn't record by the week when the show originally started. What I would do is, I would, call some people up and be like, hey, do you want to be on the show? Great. I met up with them. We'd record for like 2 or 3 hours, and then I would split the show up from there. Because the original podcast hosting service that I had a size limit as to how much you can upload for a month. It was not like Spotify for podcasters, or as it was known back in the day, Anchor, to where you had unlimited uploads. So you could unless it's like a wave file, you can upload pretty big files for super long episodes if you wanted. But
right, because everybody needs a 2 or 3 hour episode of you and your friends getting drunk and talking about movies.
We only got drunk once. That was the episode 52. That was our 1 year anniversary episode, and I thought it would be a great idea for everybody to just get really drunk.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, not a good idea.
No.
Yeah. But I think the show as it currently stands today did kind of blossom. The seed was planted in episode 77. I think that, the first episode that Kim the Geek was on. And, I think from there that did kind of, that was the start of recording weekly. That was also the start of having a format of we're going to do this at this point, this at this point. And, like you said, structure, especially in creative works, even in something like jazz, you have to have some sort of structure, right?
Right.
It just can't be all over the place.
Right.
You're not captive beef.
You can still make the notation of that music using a music staff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it's all music, which has structure.
Exactly. Now, speaking of the show, do you have any favorite episodes that come to mind?
Well, favorite episodes. I enjoyed the episodes where we've had people on the show. I really loved the book club, which we don't even count, right?
No, they were regular episodes.
Oh, were they?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I thought they were extra, like we had just done this book club thing.
No, because that was at the time too. That Talk About Evolution, where we had a Wednesday show and a Saturday show.
Right.
Yeah, thanks to the pandemic.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the pandemic. Really, the show really blossomed during the pandemic.
In terms of growth, yeah, in the amount of episodes and all that. But too, I do miss we should bring back the book club.
I agree.
Yes, at the very least, to honor Jennifer,
Yes.
but that's the thing too, bringing up Jennifer, if you go back to a few episodes ago, a friend of the show, Jennifer Lumley, did pass away, but the beauty of what the podcast has done as well is that it is an audio time capsule.
Mm-hmm.
We can go back and listen to those episodes again and still enjoy that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad I have that.
Yes. That I am too, and it's something that is comforting to me personally. And so when I was traveling, I was recently in Germany, and when I was traveling on the 10.5 hour airplane ride to get to Germany, after the connection that took 4 or 5 hours, so it's a good 16 to 20 hour day.
Mm.
And then you get there and it's the morning, so you have to stay up.
Oh God.
It's ridiculous. But which is why I'm so tired. You might have heard me yawning at some points, but like I'm exhausted from just the traveling.
Yeah.
9 time zones.
Yawning more so than you normally would in a conversation with me, but go ahead.
Anywho, on the plane ride back, I just listened to old episodes of the podcast.
I definitely love listening to some of them as well. Some not so much, but when you have 401 episodes, not everyone's going to be a gem.
Yeah.
That which does not mean 100% clear, which does not mean we didn't put every single effort we could to make each episode as the best it could. But when you're putting out something weekly, not everything's a home run. Overall, like I loved. For me, some of the past episodes, like going to see The Wizard of Oz and then commenting on it after the fact. Recording recently our thoughts after seeing A Complete Unknown was great. Definitely think back to some of the episodes I did with the Reverend Tracy that, I'm definitely proud of, like the episode we did about suicide.
Mm-hmm.
More than anything, I think, just being able to be nerdy about a lot of different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It has been refreshing in a lot of ways.
Has broadened your horizons.
It has too, in a lot of ways. Because I make no bones about the fact that we have a small platform, but we do have a platform, and I think if you have a platform of any size, you have to be responsible. And that means, self-assessing. I mean, there have been times to where I've had opinions that I don't have now. And those opinions, ended up changing because I put the thought and the work into changing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, in terms of the show, I think definitely yeah, I mean, the Tim of today is a lot different than the Tim of 2027 who welcomed you for the very first time to Friends Talking Nerdy.
2027.
2017. Is late, folks.
2027.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're almost there, but
the future.
Yeah. Anyway,
Podcast of the future.
Any other thoughts about the show?
Love the show. Just love it.
Me too.
Adore it.
Well, speaking of adore and loving, you have come back from Germany.
I have.
Tell us about your trip.
It was super fun. Everything in Germany is very well organized. All the trains run on time. It's easy to find your way around, and it's very clean, and everyone's very nice. It's interesting. I spent some time in Berlin, which was a city that was largely destroyed in World War II, but it's now one of the biggest, if not the biggest city in Europe. So that was cool to sort of see the architectural differences between the east side of Berlin and the west side of Berlin. The very brutalist kind of / communal kind of housing of the Soviet side and the more expressive architecture on the western side. I did some things that were moving in Germany, including going to the Jewish Museum and the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe, which were moving and at the time in which we live, sort of terrifying because of the parallels between what was happening in 1933 in Germany and what's happening today in the United States.
And it would be foolish to not remember those parallels and understand the concept that history can and will repeat itself
If you let it.
if you let it. I mean, like from everything that I know now, thanks to our pandemic that we endured, everything I know about the 1918 pandemic, they had a lot of the same nonsense to deal with that we hadn't, starting in 2020. You had people that took it seriously, and then you had people that were like, fuck that, I'm not wearing a mask. It's making me, I can't breathe. The same stupid arguments were had at that point. But after 1918, people over time understood that, yeah, it wasn't BS. It was real. So we need to take precautions. We also need to come up with flu shots and stuff like that. People ended up learning, but then we got too comfortable. And then, we had a bunch of morons in 2020 thinking that, I'm not going to take a vaccine. Vaccines are bad. They have a chemical that sounds bad in it. And I'm being hyperbolic there, folks, but not by much.
I've lost the thread here. Where all of a sudden we're talking about the pandemic. But so
no, again, the thread was the 1918 the flu epidemic. The flu pandemic was similar to the COVID outbreak in 2020, in the fact that there was a lot of
sure. And what I was saying is that history is repeating itself here and now in the way of 1933 Nazi Germany,
yeah,
which I think is it's incredibly disturbing. And being there in the places where people died, people who were freedom fighters, people who were resistors were killed. And it feels like that's what's going to happen in this country now. And so being there was a little bit terrifying. It was also nice to not be in the States for a little while and have a little bit of normalcy.
Even though J.D. Vance was in Germany while you were there.
That's right. Making a total ass of himself.
With his eyeliner and all that stuff. Like, I think, if anything, from what I've got from you too, even before you left Germany, I think because you are aware of those parallels, like you are at a stage to where you feel like, what can I do to help fight against that?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are a lot of parallels, but I don't think I'm too far to line by stating we're still at a point to where, cross fingers, we could still fight this in some way.
Cross fingers.
I don't think people should be naive. Like, there are too many people in this country who just think that, our government can't fail. Like, it can. And you don't want to assume it can't. You want to be able to fight and not do the kowtowing that Republicans are currently doing, because you'll have plenty of interviews that are off the record of media people asking Republicans their thoughts, and what they are saying off the record is a lot different than what they're saying on the record.
Yeah,
they're doing it because either they are scared, because there are very legitimate threats against people that are made for people that speak out against the fearless leader, or all they care about is keeping their job. And those people can rot.
Yeah, there are very few brave people.
Yeah.
A lot of them are women. A lot of them are underrepresented people. When we put it on the backs of those people to be the ones that speak out.
Yeah.
Because they have the most to lose.
Well, let's tie back to Germany here real quick.
Yeah.
And let's end here on a positive note. What would you say, as of today, is your most happiest memory of your trip?
Well, I'll tell you, it was going to this place called Liquid Rome, which was a big spa.
And if you remember a couple episodes back, you previewed that. That was one of the things you were looking forward to.
Yes. Okay. So it was just as good as I thought it was going to be. It was in this really weird building that looked like a circus tent. It was like you went into a basement and there was a 84-degree giant salt water swimming pool, like a lot of salt. So you were super bouncy. So you could hang out there for a while, then go outside to the hot tub or the sauna or the steam room or the Himalayan salt cave, or lounge on a lounger, either inside or outside, and have a nice drink from the bar. I had some elderflower lemonade. It was amazing. So that was I'd say by far, and I did that like the second day of the trip, third day of the trip maybe. And I wish I had done it more.
Yeah, you love you some hot water.
That's right.
Yep. Well, I am glad you had a wonderful time in Germany. If you check out Professor Aubrey's social medias on Blue Sky, which, you can find that information on our Blue Sky account, and I'll put that in the show description here. I'm sure you'll probably post a few pictures up, right?
Of Germany?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was thinking of liquid rum, which I did not take any photos of.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to bring my phone near water myself, so
yeah,
I would be, I don't want to hurt it. I don't want to hurt it. I love my phone.
I need my phone. I want to be with my phone.
I love you. Well, all right. I think we'll wrap things up this week then, unless you had anything else you want to say to our friends at home.
No, just keep on keeping on, peoples.
All right. So, for Chubby Checker and Chubby's Checker, the app, each Monday we'll have something in this podcast space to entertain your ear holes. Until we meet again, we bid you adieu.
So long.
Auf Wiedersehen. Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy
on YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify,
or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Goodbye, darling.